It's official. Donald Trump has solidified his takeover of the Republican National Committee. Ronna Romney McDaniel, a Trump loyalist, has stepped down as chair after being pushed out by Trump. The man replacing her is North Carolina Republican Michael Whatley, an election denier who still embraces the big lie. Now, get this. The disgraced ex-president's daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, was officially named his co-chair. The new leadership, even more MAGA than the last, is already focused on raising money. And an increasing number of RNC members believe the campaign arm should help foot Trump's legal bills associated with his criminal and civil indictments. Whatley has not specifically said whether he supports that, but he has made it clear that he will allocate resources for so-called election integrity.
We will work relentlessly in every state to ensure that it is easy to vote and hard to cheat. Over the next 8 months, the RNC will work hand in glove with President Trump's campaign to deliver on these core missions. If a dollar that we have is not directed towards winning this November, that dollar will not be spent.
Joining me now, Michael Steele, host of MSNBC's The Weekend and former chairman of the Republican National Committee. Chairman Steele?
Yes.
What's up with this new leadership?
It is the I call it the complete decapitation of the Republican National Committee from anything that was remotely connected to mainstream Republicanism, traditional conservatism. It is now fully MAGA. Well over 140 members of the 168 members of the RNC are MAGA-fied. So that takes care of your chairman, your national committee men and women. You now have installed the chair, the former chair, or current chair of North Carolina, now chairman of the RNC, Mr. Whatley, and of course the president's daughter-in-law. How do you think that's going to go when also the campaign's political leader and guru, Lasvita, is also coming over to the RNC? How do you think that's going to go? So when they're looking at
Steele, what's Lasvita's role at the RNC, the official role?
Well, I think probably somewhere along the lines of executive director, overseeing the day-to-day operations that touch on everything that the RNC does. And has a role in making sure the execution and implementation of where those dollars go happens the way Donald Trump wants them to happen. So when you hear people, whether it's Lasvita or anyone else, say that no matter how strong the expletive they use to say it, that there will be no dollars going to Donald Trump's legal defense, that is a lie. Because there are a myriad of ways in which those dollars can be used, can be siphoned off and repurposed, if you will. So I'm just telling all the good reporters out there, comb those FEC reports, baby. Comb and just look. You've got to look at the thing that pops up that suddenly was not there before but is now, and there are a lot of different things that you need to be aware of. And the fact, Jonathan, just one final point on that, that there are members inside the RNC who do not want these dollars to go in that direction. As you know, there was an effort to try to get language passed officially to prevent that from happening. But alas, it did not happen because Donald Trump didn't want it to.
Piggy bank gonna get robbed. So, Chairman Steele, the RNC says they're hiring tens of thousands of election integrity poll workers, poll watchers. That smells like voter.
Looking at themselves.
Well, would you let me get this question out? It smells like voter intimidation to me. What do you make of this strategy? Is that what this ultimately is about, right?
Yes, of course it is. I mean, look, the way these things are operationalized, the boards of elections have individuals who actually are certified to work within the confines of the precincts where the voting takes place, right? The parties typically have volunteers who, serve as poll watchers and and people who stand out, you see them a lot of times standing outside with signs going, vote for my candidate, right? And so those roles are within the required boundaries. They're not a part of the official process. What we saw happen over the last year was the RNC make efforts to get some of these people trained up so that they could then be moved inside the building. But their objectives remain the same. And I remember on a number of shows on MSNBC raising this particular fact to watch how they were operationalizing this aspect of what would be poll watchers into voting, volunteers, people who are actually working, processing people's voting through the voting process, looking at their voting records, confirming that who they are, versus what the document says. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to be concerned about there, and that's part of the plan.
So, Chairman Steele, we got a minute left, but I can't have you here and not have us talk about Senator Katie Britt and her Republican response. Here's a clip from SNL of Scarlett Johansson making a spectacular cameo appearance as Alabama Senator Katie Britt.
You know, my husband Wesley and I spend a lot of time in this kitchen worrying. Kitchens are where families have the hard conversations, like the one we'll have tomorrow about how mommy freaked out the entire country.
I mean, Chairman Steele, come on. Why did she do this?
Well, she did it because that's what she was coached to do. And it's really unfortunate because I would invite people to go on YouTube and look at, videos of Senator Britt without the coaching. Yeah, I mean, she's really good and she's very effective and would have been a very effective individual to respond. What they did was they overprepared. They tried to create something that, quite frankly, verged on, the Stepford Wives. And it was unfortunate because that's not who she is naturally. And so, again, one more reason why the response after the State of the Union needs to go the way of the dodo, because apparently that's the only thing that can do it is a dodo, and it's not a good look.
Chairman Steele, I see you, I respect you, and I must tell you, it's time to go. Michael Steele,
I am here in my office where decisions are made.